Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Wednesday, January the 25th, and welcome to our commentary. I want to begin by directing you. I have a post over at the American Thinker today, Wednesday, talking about the latest craziness coming from the woke movement. Maybe you remember Aretha Franklin. She was a very popular singer back in the 70s, 80s, 60s, probably one of the most famous uh, African American vocalist of the last 50 years. She had a bunch of great songs. And one of her songs is You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. Well, apparently, some of the woke people want to cancel that song because what they're saying is there's no such thing as a natural woman. I guess their point of view is that I guess women are I guess there's no such thing as a woman, this debate as to what is a woman. This is really crazy. I just don't know how to I just don't know how to explain this anymore. I mean, this is just absolutely crazy what is happening with the woke movement. And here's the thing that is most interesting is there are not that many people. This so-called woke movement gets a lot of free publicity, and that's because whenever they do something strange like this, they get a tremendous amount of publicity. Like this, wanting to cancel uh, a song by Aretha Franklin, or when they want to cancel this or that. So, I don't know. Somebody's got to put their foot down, but this is crazy. I mean, if you don't know what a natural woman is, if you don't know what a natural man is, maybe you should go back and take seventh grade biology. I don't know. Maybe have a conversation with your mom or dad. They can probably tell you. Your mom could probably tell you what a woman is. But this is crazy. And this is the kind of stuff that I think, again, they get way more publicity than they should be getting. And this is why, it always ends up in this crazy situation. Well, anyway, check it out, my post over at the American Thinker. Some great news coming out of Texas today, and that is the Texas economy. The job growth in the Texas economy is just absolutely stunning. In 2022, 650,000 new jobs were created in Texas. Jobs are everywhere, 80,000 in manufacturing and, just tremendous, tremendous collection of different data about the Texas economy. I picked up my information from the Dallas Morning News. They've got a whole front page article with all the different graphs and all of that. But the bottom line is that Texas is growing and growing in a very healthy fashion. But let me give you an example. 650,000 new jobs in Texas, 621,000 new jobs in California. They've got a population of 40 million. We've got a population of 30 million. I think that tells you everything you want to know, that our economy is outgrowing the largest economy in the United States, which is California, because of the sheer size of the population. And I think the question, of course, is why? Why is the Texas economy doing so well? Well, because of the policies that we've implemented over the years. Basically, in Texas, we have a free market approach. We believe that if you make money, you should keep it. We have a pro-business, very pro-business friendly legislature. We want people to come here and produce things. We want you to bring your business to Texas, and we're going to keep the taxes pretty low so that you can not just produce a lot of things, but make a lot of money and compete anywhere else. So the Texas economy, one of the great stories, really, of the last 20 years or so, and especially now, when you look at some of these relocation figures, I mean, the states that people are leaving and the states that people are moving into, well, they're leaving California, they're leaving New York, they're leaving Illinois. And where are they moving to? Texas, Florida, Ohio, you name it, the red states. And that's just not a coincidence. I think there's a lot to do. It has a lot to do with the policies that these states have implemented, the business approach or the business friendly policies that these states have implemented, in contrast to the hostility that is shown to businesses in many of these other states like California and New York and so on. So they're losing people, they're losing businesses. We're gaining them in Texas and Florida and so on. And that's just the way it is. People are voting with their feet. Now, let me make a little prediction, because I think another issue that is going to drive a lot of people to Texas and to some of the so-called red states is going to be school choice. I think when many of these states, and Texas will have its own school choice, I'm pretty sure, out of the legislature this year. I think Florida already has a plan. I know that Iowa just adopted a plan. I know Arizona has a plan. And I think what you're going to see is more and more states move in the direction of school choice. That means putting the parents not just in the middle of their kids' education, but also financially in the middle of their kids' education, because they can use some of their taxes and so on to put their kids in a school of their choice. I think that's another thing that is going to bring more and more families and more businesses to Texas and some of the other school choice states. So we're in the right direction here. Things are moving in our direction. And what I do not understand, frankly, is how California and New York and Illinois can continue to lose people. And yet their elected leaders, they don't really react to it. They don't seem to understand what the problem is, or they don't seem to want to do anything about it. It just makes you wonder, why are they doing this? I mean, if you're the governor of New York, you have to know what's happening to your state. You're losing people. They're leaving your state. In fact, the governor of New York, in her acceptance speech when she was not reelected, but when she was elected in 2022, she herself said that we have to make New York more attractive and safer for New Yorkers. Well, it hasn't really done much about that. That part of the promise hasn't even been, not even taken seriously, if you were to talk to people from New York. So there's a problem. There's a problem in these states, and they don't seem to want to do anything about it. Now, speaking of states, at the moment, 20 states are filing a lawsuit against the Biden administration. And this has to do with this latest policy that the Biden administration wants to implement, something to do with the Cubans and the Venezuelans and the Haitians who arrive in the United States, and different numbers and how many they're going to take and so on. And I have no problem, as I've said many times. I think political asylum is very much a tradition of the United States, but it has to be done in an orderly fashion. And it also has to be done correctly, meaning the Congress has to write this law and approve this. It cannot be done by executive order, as we seem to be getting from this administration. So this one is going to end up in the courts. My guess is that the states are going to win, because the states are correct in what they're saying here. The president of the United States doesn't have the ability to create immigration laws, to write these immigration laws. That's just not a prerogative or a power that the president of the United States has. Now, if he wants to do this, if he wants to create certain conditions for people from Cuba or Venezuela or whatever to come to the United States, I'm not necessarily against it, but it should be done through the Congress. It should be promoted through the Congress, sent to the Congress, so that there is a debate, as there should be, in the Congress, and then the Congress can pass something that they can send to the president for signature. But this idea that, Joe Biden is just going to be sitting there in the Oval Office signing executive orders for this or for this or for this or for that, well, he's not doing very well in the courts anyway, because every time he writes one of these, they end up in the courts, and he ends up losing, something that he's been doing a lot of lately, if you've been following the news. Well, we're going to close today with a memory. It was done this week back in 1978, that the album, we used to call them albums back then. I think they call them CDs now or whatever, but we used to call them albums back in the 60s and 70s. It was the long playing album, the LP, as it was commonly known. But the album of the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack became number one. And it sat at the number one position for months. It was the best selling album of 1978. It eventually sold about 30 million copies in the United States. It's still the best selling soundtrack album in American history. And this was from the movie Saturday Night Fever. And the original part of the soundtrack were songs by the Bee Gees, the brothers Gibb, who wrote the soundtrack for this movie. Here's the interesting thing about it. As Paul Harvey used to say, here's the rest of the story. When the Bee Gees wrote the songs for what would eventually become Saturday Night Fever or the soundtrack, they didn't know that this was going to be part of a movie. They were simply recording their new album in France, and they got a phone call from Robert Stigwood, who was their manager and the producer and the owner of the record company. And he said, look, I need 3 or 4 songs. We may be making a movie. But they didn't know anything about the story of the movie. They didn't know anything. Of course, the Saturday Night Fever movie was inspired by a newspaper article that came out of a New York magazine in the late 70s. And it was an article written by a New York reporter talking about these teenagers who would go dancing Saturday night. That's where the inspiration for the movie Saturday Night Fever came from. So Robert Stigwood, their manager, producer, and the owner of the enterprise, put together this movie. He brought in John Travolta, who at the time was not that well known. Well, he was on a TV show, but certainly not the Travolta that we know today. And they made this movie, Saturday Night Fever. It was an instant smash. It just took off like crazy. And the whole country was dancing to the rhythm of Saturday Night Fever in 1978. It was one of the biggest musical showcases of all time. So on this day, Saturday Night Fever began its number one run in the American charts, and it was up there for a long time. Several songs from the movie Saturday Night Fever were number one by the Bee Gees and by other groups as well. So if you remember Saturday Night Fever, well, you probably remember buying your copy of the album because you and 30 other million people bought the same album. Thank you for listening. Everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you later. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas. Have a great day.